From a motel that looks like the scene of a bloody murder to a secret facility run by vicious war criminals in hiding, here are 10 of the most terrifying and haunted abandoned places in the world. Number 10. Pine Bluff Motel. Deep in the heart of Arkansas, this creepy motel looks like it was the site of a grisly murder. The name of the place is the Admiral Benbow Inn, and it appears to have been abandoned without any sort of organization or plan. Furniture is still scattered around the rooms and outdoors, rotting away, gathering mold, and looking creepier by the hour. The electricity doesn't work quite right anymore, meaning the rooms are all dark and full of mysterious terrors or violent entities, both human and supernatural. It's possible that criminals still use this place as a hideout to plan more nefarious activity, but even more chilling is the fact that there are bloodstains all over a number of different rooms, suggesting that someone was killed here. It's possible that even more than one person met their end at this creepy, disturbing motel, as there is still crime scene tape lingering in various out-of-the-way corners of several rooms. I suspect that the victims are not at peace here, as the remnants of their deaths still sit unattended. For $1 million, I might try and spend a night here, but I don't think it would be easy to fall asleep in a place like this. You never know if you'd be awoken by a ghost, a murderer, or something even worse. If we're being honest, it would probably be a good idea to have this entire place demolished and rebuilt as something entirely new. Have you ever stayed in a motel or hotel that you thought was haunted? Which one was it? Where and when did you stay there? And what made you think it was haunted? Tell me about your experience in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to The Biggest for more intense and scary videos just like this one. Number 9. Down Street Bunker. In World War II, the British leadership needed safe places to hide during the aerial bombardment of London. What did they do? They used an abandoned underground train station. This station had been built in 1907, but was abandoned because not enough people used it. That meant that during the 1940s, it was repurposed to house men like Winston Churchill to protect them from bombs falling from above. It was an eerie place then, and after it was abandoned midway through the war, it only got creepier. Trains rush by at high speed on the other side of a metal grate as you walk through cramped corridors full of dust and pests. There are tours, but outside of those tour hours, this place is dangerous and totally abandoned. What's worse, it's probably haunted. The ghosts of deceased British soldiers and civilians from the Blitz of London in 1940 reside in those tunnels, looking for their lost Prime Minister and other officials to try to warn them about the bombs falling from 80 years ago. And when they aren't wandering around, mischievous youths and other miscreants are probably up to no good down there too. I'm surprised they haven't gone down there and really cleaned it out. But then again, who wants that horrid job? Number 8. Valmont Butte. What was once a Native American spiritual site and burial ground was desecrated by white settlers and eventually turned into an industrial site. Of course, after the industrial site was abandoned, the whole area became terribly haunted. Originally, this place was held by the Arapaho tribe of Native Americans, and even as recently as 2007, the tribe used it for spiritual ceremonies. However, in the 1940s, a mill to mine and refine gold and fluorspar was built on this site after white settlers took it from the tribe. This was not a welcome development to the spiritual presence at Valmont Butte. The mine polluted the air and water, desecrated the land, and eventually was closed after contaminating the whole area. Now it sits abandoned just a few miles outside Boulder, Colorado. The spirits of those who were disturbed by the mine still get angry whenever trespassers wander on their land, and so I would avoid this place without getting permission first. Some daredevil explorers still wander onto the premises, expecting to find excitement and danger, and aside from the rusting cranes and old buildings, they may find strange noises or auras that make a clear sign that they really should not have intruded. But curiosity keeps new people coming there. Hopefully someday the whole site can be cleaned up and returned to the remaining members of the native tribes who once worshipped there. Number 7. Hachioji Castle. This terrifying abandoned fortress is a relic from 450 years ago. Hachioji Castle was built in the 1570s by a famous samurai, Hojo Ujiteru. That's right, in those days, samurai built castles and fortresses to protect their territory. Ujiteru built it on a mountain in order to maintain the high ground in case of invasion, with many defensive fortifications in strategic positions to deter an enemy force. The leader sadly left only 1,300 men behind at his castle when he went to help relieve his allies, who were being besieged by a rival samurai named Toyotomi Hideyoshi. But it was a fatal miscalculation, as in an act of vengeance, in 1590, more than 50,000 men among Hideyoshi's forces arrived to storm the castle by force. The vast number of soldiers captured it in just one day. Then Hideyoshi had the castle destroyed as an act of punishment. Additionally, he was concerned that it could be used against him. For years afterwards, the site remained abandoned because it was believed to be haunted. Today, it lies totally destroyed and occupied only by spirits. Although as a historic preservation effort in 1990, some small pieces of it, including a bridge across a moat and the main entrance, were rebuilt. The government of Japan has constructed a tunnel for a major highway through the mountain that holds the castle, which only further disturbs the spirits that still occupy it today. Visitors can hear the screams of women, probably those who lived in the castle and suffered greatly at the hands of the conquerors all those years ago. After they were victimized and murdered in brutal fashion by the soldiers in Hideyoshi's army, their souls never left those grounds, and they are still waiting to be peacefully laid to rest. It's unclear if they'll ever get their peace. Number 6. Chase Vault. The island of Barbados is supposedly a tropical paradise, located in the eastern part of the Caribbean and full of lush greenery and beautiful beaches. However, it's not all fun and games here. A mysterious vault filled with coffins has been reported to have its contents moved around repeatedly over the centuries. The name of the burial vault is called Chase Vault, and each time it was opened up to add a new body, graveyard workers noticed that the coffins had moved. These stories go back to the early 1800s, including 1808, 1812, and 1819. The coffins, which were ordered in straight rows each time workers unsealed it and entered, were repeatedly found in disarray. Some flipped over, and others shifted around the floor of the tomb. Some claimed that earthquakes or flooding were the culprits, but others claimed that without visible damage to the bricks or stones that made up the vault, those natural explanations were not realistic. After several incidents that spooked local townspeople, the governor ordered that the coffins be buried separately in the ground to avoid future spooky situations. Of course, that appeared to have stopped the moving coffins, but it didn't necessarily stop the haunted nature of the burial vault. The stories have only spread over the years to include potential involvement by the Society of Freemasons, and today, no one is allowed to enter the tomb. Although, to be honest, I don't know what kind of crazy person would even want to. Number 5. BROOKSBRAE Brick Factory. Deep in the heart of the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, an abandoned brick factory sits there as a terrifying and spooky place where adventurer seekers and agitated spirits collide. The Pine Barrens are already a spooky place, inhabited by mysterious creatures like the Jersey Devil, but this factory might be one of the most unsettling abandoned places of the whole area. The factory was originally built during the early 1900s, but the owner died before it could be fully completed. In 1915, a fire broke out when the caretaker accidentally set the chimney ablaze, burning down a portion of the facility and killing the caretaker and his wife. Their spirits still occupy it today, though the factory was never finished. Nowadays, it's abandoned, though graffiti artists, off-road vehicle riders, and mischievous hikers still find their way here on occasion. There's not very good cell phone service out by the old factory, and little in the way of civilization around it. If you don't run into an unfriendly animal, or a person up to no good, the ghosts might scare you into turning around and leaving this place. To be honest, leaving would probably be the smart thing to do regardless. Number 4. Oakwood Hospital. This place was originally known as the Kent County Lunatic Asylum in England and was built between 1829 and 1833. Like most psychiatric hospitals of its time, conditions deteriorated into nearly criminally neglectful status. Of course, it was thankfully brought up to standards that were at least humane, with additional buildings and more funding to care for the poor souls who were kept in there. Of course, that didn't stop it from being abandoned after over 150 years, because fewer and fewer people were being admitted to long-term care at a permanent residential facility. That made this place the perfect target for malicious and mischievous arsonists. That's right, reckless teenagers and other petty criminals decided to vandalize and set fire to the buildings once they were no longer in use, just because they could get away with it. That led to the decision to demolish some of the buildings before a truly dangerous fire could break out. However, some of the historically valuable facilities were spared, and people can still sneak onto the property to try to explore the abandoned rooms. The painful stories of some of the insane people who endured their lives in here has led to speculation that this place, too, is haunted. I would never trespass in an abandoned mental hospital. Would you? Number 3. Eastern State Penitentiary. This abandoned prison is so famous, even Charles Dickens visited it in the 1800s. He was shocked and appalled by what he saw there for obvious reasons. It was notable because it used a technique that we now call torture, solitary confinement. That's right, prisoners at this terrifying place were kept in confinement at all times. They almost invariably went insane. It was thought at that time that solitary confinement would lead to criminals repenting and trying to better themselves. To be sure, solitary confinement is terrifying enough that I would do just about anything to avoid it. However, in those days the practice was very popular, if controversial, and led to terrible mental anguish for the inmates. When the facility finally closed and was abandoned in the 1970s, it's no surprise that those inmates' ghosts finally came back and took over the prison that took their minds. If you ever set foot in this place, you can almost sense the 100-year-old terror that these men experienced every day. Of course, if you're feeling particularly brave, they do offer tours. And yes, you can schedule a night tour. I wouldn't, but if you're just crazy enough to go somewhere like this at night, they'll be happy to accommodate you. Number 2. Argentinian Nazi hideout. After the end of World War II, many of the defeated leadership of the evil Nazi Party tried to escape Germany so they couldn't be captured and forced to stand trial for their crimes. Knowing that they might need to do this, they actually planned ahead of time and built secret bases in remote corners of the world in order to have safe houses to escape to when the time came. One of the most chilling and spooky ones is still around in the jungle of Argentina. Near the border with Paraguay, an abandoned and run-down facility contained German coins with dates between 1938 and 1941, and a piece of a dinner plate with the text "Made in Germany" printed on it in German. The secret compound was discovered nearly 70 years later by a team of explorers, and the physical evidence is very convincing. This was one of the last undisturbed relics of that horrific time in history. Of course, many of the disgraced leaders actually made fraudulent identities for themselves and lived in cities like Buenos Aires, rather than hiding out in the jungle for years undiscovered. However, it doesn't change the fact that this remote outpost had been tended to by some people with deep connections to that violent regime. It seems like this was one of many places where the World War II era German leadership intended to escape justice, and it's entirely possible that their spirits still haunt this place to this day. If it were up to me, the entire abandoned building would be inspected and taken apart piece by piece to obtain any clues about the history of its construction, then razed down to the foundation and replaced with a memorial to the victims of these vicious men. Number 1. The LALAURIE Mansion. This disturbing building looked like a typical socialite's manor during the 1800s, full of parties, beautiful people, fancy food, and quality alcohol. However, within the upper stories of a landmark location in New Orleans' French Quarter was something terrible and disgusting. In 1834, a fire broke out in the kitchen, and when the authorities arrived at the scene, They uncovered the disfigured bodies of deceased slaves in the attic. Apparently, Madame LaLaurie was a deviant, sadistic murderer who enjoyed torturing enslaved people. She looked like a perfect member of high society, but for some inexplicable reason felt compelled to hurt and kill people. Because of her position in the world, she was able to get away with it for a long time, but when the law caught up to her, she fled to France. Even though her original house was demolished after the fire and the discovery, the rebuilt mansion was still terribly haunted. People can hear the screams and cries of terror from the long-gone victims. If you volunteered to stay the night in this unique, horrific, and truly creepy place for even one single night, I would have to question your sanity. This is one of the most haunted places in one of the most haunted cities in the United States, and there are countless safer, less spooky places to lay down for the night. Simply put, friends don't let friends stay in a place where a sadistic murderer tortured people. That's all for the most terrifying, haunted, abandoned places today. Which one was the scariest, in your opinion? Which one would you not mind spending the night at? Tell me in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to The Biggest if you haven't already. See you next time.